So Brice here is going to talk about how you can basically change your business plan to reflect the current reality. Brice is the managing partner of Globalive Capital and was a co-founder and CFO of Wind Mobile. Brice is someone I've been lucky to know over the last few years and is one of the most active participants in this ecosystem as an investor and a backer and just someone that really cares about what goes on. So Brice, maybe we can start off by thank you for joining us, and let's hear some of your preliminary thoughts on the current situation.
Okay, thanks very much, Alex. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay, thanks for bringing me back, even though we're at a difficult time. As I'm talking, everyone, I've made a sequence of notes, and they're detailed and dense, and I want to make sure that I cover them, so you'll see me looking down periodically. I've personally been through every crisis since 1987. I will say the 87, I was in high school, but I do remember it. Each one is a smack in the face. This one is no exception. It feels pretty tough. But importantly, as an ecosystem, we have rebuilt ourselves over the last 10 years with a far better foundation than we've ever had. We're strong, we're resilient, we work well together as a community, and we will get through this. You do not have to do this alone. You have teams, you have shareholders, you have boards, you have advisors, you have lenders. It is important to continually, dynamically iterate using the best available data, which obviously is changing daily. My comments are going to be made rapidly and are general, but will be applicable in some way, shape, or form to any type of business. Sadly, I guess I've restructured a number of businesses over my career, and I've had to pull some principles from that era. The other thing I'll say is that, a SaaS business is obviously different than a transaction business, which is different than a payments business. The customer profiles are different of all businesses. So to apply principles to your specific set of circumstances. And last but not least, and I think this is very important, we at Globalive Capital invest in a very diversified portfolio across a lot of different asset categories. And we've spoken with all asset categories in detail over the last week. And I can tell you that venture is not alone. All asset categories in their own way are struggling with the same issues around liquidity, cash flow, burn rate, runway, and so on. And are applying, we'll call it, similar principles to how to deal with.
So if that's the case, Brice, how do we go about right-sizing our business?
Okay, so I'm going to break this into three components. First is mentality. So Sequoia, a very famous VC out of the Valley, put what they're calling the Black Swan memo out about a week or two ago, talking about the kind of the triage, the wartime mentality required as a result of COVID. Every organization I have spoken to is acutely focused right now on survivability, managing liquidity, and runway in a period of what we will call extreme uncertainty. Alex knows, I'm a paranoid accountant by nature. And guess what? You're all going to be joining me in my little bubble of paranoia. Words to live by: control what you can control and measure what matters. So the second point I want to make here is framework. The key framework we are working with right now is cash flow understanding and management. The core tool is a cash forecast for the next 6 months, of which the first 3 months we would do weekly, which is receiver type driven, and the next 3 months are monthly. This should be rolling and extended as prudent. Last but not least, our core output is the cash balance over time. In all cases, you will be communicating closely with your shareholders and your creditors and your board. If your cash flow, when you go through this exercise, goes negative over the next 12 months, then you will need to be working very closely with your funding partners to come up with a solution. I would encourage you to monitor government programs very closely: EDC, BDC, SIF, RDAs, banks, you name it, and close. There are some people closing rounds. We're reading about them almost every day. Close what you are finishing up on the equity and debt side.
So how do you go about determining how to right-size a business?
Okay, so let's talk first of all about revenue and collections, or cash inflows. So starting point is to figure out cash coming in. First is revenue forecast. This is a very difficult exercise right now because of the extreme uncertainty. Forecasting is dynamic. It's changing based on inputs that are changing daily. You need to sensitize, you need scenarios, you need to probabilize outcomes. Be honest about your revenue and understand where you sit in your customer's priority about how they manage their costs. To give a couple of examples, we have a SaaS business in our portfolio that is modeling three scenarios: a 20% decline in revenue as their base, a 40% as scenario 2, and a 50% as scenario 3. We have a transaction business that is actually modeling 0 revenue for the next 3 months and a very small uptake over the 3 months thereafter. The draconian drop in revenue that we are seeing projected is pretty consistent across the venture ecosystem. Second issue on inflows is collections. It's one thing to bill and figure out what your revenue is going to be. It's another thing to then collect it. We believe that you have to kind of look at days sales outstanding or how long it's going to take you to collect. Similarly to revenue, you have to sensitize, you have to take dynamic data and inputs, and you have to continue to kind of model that over time.
So if that's the revenue side, how about the cost? That's what everyone talks about. That's what that Sequoia memo talked a lot about. I actually think I think Helen posted that memo, a link to that memo in the chat. But how would you look at cost?
I would read that memo. It's general, but it does set the stage for what we're talking about, and everyone is obviously going deeper. I've been on a ton of calls about this, Alex, including one with you and a co-invest, as we know. In general, costs need to be managed downward using a triage approach with some variability for business considerations and runway. We break costs into three categories: headcount, discretionary non-headcount, and non-discretionary non-headcount. I'm going to talk about each of them quickly, and I'm going to talk about headcount last. So discretionary non-headcount, this is travel, meals and entertainment, contractors, marketing, these types of things. These costs will inherently go down as a result of how we're all working right now. But in general, we should be taking a scalpel to these costs right now in a wartime style, chopping, negotiating discounts, stretching out payment terms, whatever the various ways of doing that are. Everything is negotiable here. And again, the other side is just trying to hang on as well. Non-discretionary non-headcount, rent, insurance premiums, interest and debt, long-term contracts, taxes. In a normal world, even in other scenarios of restructuring that I've seen, we would not normally have these on the table short-term. They are longer-term, more complicated type costs. However, I think for the first time in these types of crises, we're actually seeing these things become negotiable now. Examples. Landlords of some retailers in our private equity portfolio are deferring rent, potentially abating rent. We have some offices in our venture portfolio that have already achieved rent discounts. If a city abates property tax, you might be able to do something with your landlord. The government has allowed tax deferrals already as one of their policies. The BDC is allowing interest and potentially principal deferrals, and the list goes on and on and on. The point here is do not assume anything is fixed. Assume everything is negotiable. On the headcount side, I think Marianne is doing good work, and it's important work, and this comment is not helpful to that, but here's what I'll say. It's complicated. First of all, a labor lawyer obviously needs to be consulted. I am not a labor lawyer, but there is a spectrum that one has to look at in cases like this. And it ranges from outright termination to layoffs with the intention of calling back, to hour reductions and salary reductions for periods of time. It should be coordinated with government programs. There's a work share that's been articulated for the COVID crisis. Everyone in the press is talking about a work subsidy, which other countries have done. Stay close to that. And the reality is this is the human element. It's extraordinarily sensitive. And in all cases, one wants to be respectful, authentic, and communicate more than they should. So those are my three main categories of cost. Last but not least here, remember, like with sales and collections, you also have costs and payments. Payment terms are very significantly negotiable and should be looked to be extended wherever they can. And I want to raise one final point before we move on. Let's go back to revenue. Think of your revenue in the context of what I just said about cost. Be honest with where you sit in the mindset of your customer and use that data to help reiterate your revenue.
Excellent. Thanks, Brice. We have time for one or two questions. If anyone wants to type a question in the chat, we can see if we can get to it. If not, I think Brice said he might be available for one-on-one chats later on. I don't know if you want that's still outstanding, Brice.
Yeah, I'll stick around after for sure. And I do have a couple more points if people don't have a question.
Well, someone would say they'd want your notes. Would you be willing to share your notes later?
I will put my notes on LinkedIn after and send them over to the TechTO team. Absolutely.
Okay, it sounds like.
Sorry.
Go on, yeah. Let's give you your last point of advice because it seems like no one's picked a question up.
Okay, so three other things I want to say. One is, remember, a P&L is not cash flow. CapEx also needs to be looked at and cut significantly with a scalpel. Number two, look at the government side carefully. The lobby is pushing for forgivable loans through the bank system of significant size. And as I mentioned, the wage subsidy. Keep close to that. And I want to make one last macro comment. In spite of all of this, myself and my business partners believe there will be long-term changes to customer behavior that will create opportunities. Once we get through the triage and the emergency, keep in mind there's going to be new customer discovery opportunities. Put 10% of your brain space to opportunities, because there will be new things ahead.
Thanks so much, Brice. Really appreciate
Thank you, guys. Good luck to everyone, and I appreciate you inviting me. Thank you.
Yeah.